Hello, good evening, welcome to another session from the Wise Asylum. Hello. Interesting week, the Davos, all the nonsense that has gone on there. I mean, this Schwab guy, he's an odd fella, isn't he? Let's be honest. But is he any more odd than the rest of them? I'm not so sure he is. I think he's perfect, actually. And are you aware? Because we looked at that list, didn't we, to the week? Just at how many countries. And each, flag had a person attending. Now, did you know it costs 45 grand per person to go? So all them people on that list have paid 45 grand. So if they're your MP in the cabinet or such, who's paid for that? You? Me? Have we paid for it? There's no way is that not going on expenses, is it not? Or some donor has paid it and picked up the bill for them. But £45,000 per person to attend. I mean, if that doesn't just tell you that you've got to be stinking rich as well to go, so that it's not a club for you, is it? It's not a club for us. We're not in it. But he ended it with odd, really deadly serious about in 10 years we will more than likely have brain implants, brain chips, so that somebody can see exactly how we're reacting to stimuli, chemically, psychologically, physically, and he was deadly serious, so that's on the cards. I mean, it's all been about getting rid of what they call fake news, of course, what means truth, so it's been a lot about that. NATO seems to be a bit divided at the moment, which is maybe not a bad thing, really. Let's be fair about it. I mean, as long as Russia ceases all actions this side of the Danube, which is its original border, then Vlad the Impaler has carried out what he said he was going to carry out. But then you've got to take on board. So there's voices claiming that there's actually a game going on here. You've got Germany, Russia, China and Israel, and indeed Iran, operating together in order they can just wipe the floor with Europe. America seems to be pulling itself together a little bit, especially in the Senate, although it's scripted, it's so well crafted to undermine the left. It's ridiculous. They've got what's going on with Biden now and all the top secret stuff going on. I mean, come on, what is going on over there? They're so trying to wreck America. It's frightening, because if America goes down the pan, say bye-bye to the free world. You know what I'm saying? And if America goes down pan, you've got Europe going down pan, and us on his own. That wouldn't be a good thing either, would it? So it's important that people pay attention to that side of it, rather than just keep focusing on, I've got my Zelensky shirt on. He's just focusing on that tit, as he basically becomes a conduit from which Biden can empty the United States of weapons and military capacity to ISIS and to all these CIA. See, when I say America, I don't see the CIA as American. It might be filled with Americans, but its overall command is definitely of the Jesuit order, as we know. So we know the CIA have been involved in creating these mercenary groups, such as ISIS and ISIL and whatever other one you want to talk about. And through Zelensky, with all these weapons that have gone over there, so much of it has been sold off to them forces. So they've rearmed. So Biden, in essence, through him, he's completely armed Afghanistan. He's armed all these mercenary groups across the Middle East through Zelensky. It's Netanyahu is back on the scene. Old Benjamin there. I'd say Ben David's little schley, Ben David being the precursor to the Messiah, or the Mashiach, who does war. So as soon as he's back on scene, Russia's off, kicks off, goes ballistic. So that does add a bit of credence to the idea that there is some kind of secret deal going on between Germany, Russia, Israel. and quite possibly China. But Iran has also been implicated, and anybody knows the history of Iran, that is no surprise. Is it? It's not a surprise at all. We've had an interesting Pakistani delegate who I think did us all a favour, and in his interview made sure many times that he connected the World Economic Forum with the New World Order as one of the same. And I think he did us a favour there by mentioning it and the two terms together. So that were interesting as well. We've had a couple of people who've come out and spoken of what's really going on in there. So that's good as well. There's been a lot of set-up kind of stuff with Rebel News and that kind of malarkey to feed Tucker Carlson and all these, Alex Jones, all these groups under General, is it Jim Jones? Now, Jim Jones, if anybody has watched Kay Griggs, who was the wife of George Griggs, who was sort of the, he headed the assassination squad for the US secret or Cherry Marines, as she called them. Jim Jones was involved and others. Well, she gave a series of interviews, I think it's 4 hours long if you pick it up now. So if you really want to understand how that side of things is working, you would need to see Kay Griggs. Seek out Kay Griggs on YouTube or any other platform that's got video, and I strongly advise that you do watch it if you haven't. You will be a lot more aware of how our militaries have been co-opted at the top end as well, and then therefore carrying out stuff in our names, as it were, all over the world, and this has been going on for a long time. But then you get into that circle, you're talking Kissinger Associates again. You're back to Kissinger. So Kissinger and Rupert Murdoch have always been best mates, as was Peter Carrington, Lord Peter Carrington here, who handled Margaret Thatcher. So we've been under the auspices of Kissinger Associates, one might say. You can definitely trace it back to Edward Heath, the man who signed us into Europe unconstitutionally, signed off by the Queen, again, unconstitutionally, because she was sitting as the Chair of Estates and not as the monarch. Privy Council taking that role. Privy Council, of course, we've examined, is pretty much a billionaires club, and it, you could say, is actually the cabinet that sits atop Chalco Westminster. Whichever party is in power, it doesn't matter. This political class create the cabinet. They're under the whip system. You know, you can't step out of line. They've all been forced to take the oath to King Charles III, even though he's not the king. You can't take regal powers until you've taken the coronation oath. Some of his pappings out this week, we can see clearly he's no intention of taking the coronation oath as it is. We need to be aware of this. That cannot happen, otherwise England has gone. And he will be the man that did it, without a shadow. His mother planted another on top, but Charles ultimately, if nobody starts to pay attention between now and May, will cement that, and whatever constitutional oath he will take will have no bearing whatsoever on anything that we in the West are consenting to, accepting as common custom, because it isn't common custom. So again, we have to be, we have to keep our eyes on this game that's going on here, instead of just focusing to the shit show that's going on over there in the Ukraine, because basically what we do know is that Ukrainians are being murdered and killed by the thousand. So you're looking like a genocide here of an actual nation. And Vlad's carrying that out with vigour. And he's loving it. He's, at the beginning of this, I tried to keep a balance sheet, and we did discuss Ukraine as it were moving, because it did look like, if war can be classed as acceptable, it was being carried out in an acceptable manner, especially if you compare it to how NATO has sort of played out its wars since at least 2001. And it did look like he was true to his word, but I mean, that's gone right out of the window. And this guy's just wrecking the place. They're demolishing Ukraine, so they're obviously going to rebuild it. They want to rebuild it. You know, like they've done all over Europe. It started in Dresden. Completely and utterly annihilated the architecture, which was one of the most architecturally aesthetic places in Europe. So they definitely have an agenda when it comes to rebuilding. If they pick an area, they firstly have to demolish it. And we'll get into a bit of that data as we go on here, because so I've been unable to actually find the document, but somebody called Schwab on the Substack had a paper called Theatre Kid Occupied Government. And in that, he makes a statement that the last reset was from 1850 to 1900. And that it took 100 years previous to that to set that reset up. So that by 1900, they had the reset in place. Now, we know that at 2000, here in our time, they launched a myriad of corporations, charitable trusts, etc. to push this reset forward. Now, we also know that they've extended the agenda from 2021 to 2050. So that gives them 50 years. So they're giving themselves the same timeline that they allowed themselves at the last reset. So, that said, if you're aware of Jason's work, Jason Brashears, and the Phoenix, so what you get from that is it's pretty clear that in 1902, most of the foundations, the conglomerates, the corporations, the mammoths that we've all grown up with, such as GEC, Northrop Grumman, all these huge and massive institutions, all started appearing from 1902. And it has been suggested on his channel that they were expecting a phoenix. Well, looking at this data doesn't suggest that at all. In fact, contrary to that, this were all part of another reset, which reminded me of that interview we did, or that when we went through the interview with this guy, or female said Elite Insider, when he said this isn't the end times. And he was adamant about that. He was absolutely adamant this is not the end times. So, of course, he's talking about biblical there, but what we can see today is the end times in relation to our old world. But when you get into it's the prophecy stuff. Now, when you study the Jesuit stuff, futurism, historicism, etc., there were three bands of sort of paradigms that the Jesuits formulated. And futurism was that what they've given the Abrahamic religions since maybe the Middle Ages is in fact a rehash of what was prophesied for up to AD 70, rehashed and projected into the future, and that then the fifth science built that system. So this is what, in my opinion, the Templars brought over, Solomon's Temple, and that from that time they've been building that future. So the Bible as prophecy, as far as it's been fulfilled, and it was fulfilled in AD 70, and then they've recreated it and thrown it again and started again. And that made a lot of sense to me when I was studying that stuff, because the Jesuits are involved. You've got to remember that. So there's all sorts of things going on, but suffice to say, we now have another idea as to exactly what was going on around 1900. So then 1902, 1903, when all these myriad of new companies, corporations, foundations, etc. began. So from 1850 to 1900 is when as they're doing now, from 2000 we can say up to 250, they are now putting together the reset, and that it took them 100 years to the 2000, so that's 1900, to prepare to get ready to launch the reset. So if you're understanding that timeline, it's quite interesting. So they're working on like a 150-year timescale. And also, the Elite Insider said that there were a time when the people did nearly stop these ruling bloodlines from carrying out the reset, I would say. And that could only be because there was a particular time when enough people could see beyond the propaganda and see behind the curtain to what's really going on. Check your pick. Probably printing press time, I would have thought. Or maybe even the knowledge that people, the general people, had gained by going over into the Crusades. Who knows? But if he said there was a time when, then it's got to be, when you look at it from that angle, a time when enough people could see and enough people tried to stop it. Well, I think we're at that time again. You know, we've got the internet. It's spread information across the globe, good and bad. But you know, that's down to us how we understand things. And we are again at that time. NATO's divided at the moment, but then if the German connection to Russia has a clique going on, then we can understand why they've done that. Personally, I don't want our stuff going over to Ukraine. It's not because I don't like Ukrainians. I have nothing against Ukrainians. In fact, when the bird flu thing were on in 2009-10, I had a lot of communications with Ukrainians because there were a lot going on there then, and that was before 2014, when Obama and Biden set up this puppet government and system and military, which Vlad the Impaler is annihilating. There's a lot of Polish guys over there now in Ukrainian uniforms. You know, if you're not careful, you're going to have Polish. You know, we're on a bit of a tiptoe there. It could actually go to thing, but I don't think that is the plan. So I don't know. It's interesting to say. So on the one hand, Germany's not actually doing a bad thing, but if it is because they're in sync and cahoots, and it is just about demolishing Europe, then the leaders of Europe, including the US, have ensured that Europe gets destroyed through issuing these sanctions. Because what a load of malarkey and gobbledygook that were. So we do have to pay attention. But if we get back to what I was saying about these resets, we could say, I mean, we can go on forever, but if we go back to 1066, and whatever were going on in England, all of a sudden we got this new system called feudalism. And you could then say the church spent, from Rome leaving up to Alfred and then beyond, preparing for that system. If this 150-year system is in fact a true timeline, which does seem to be the case. So that was, you could say that was absolutely a reset, without a shadow of a doubt, and a lot of people were murdered, were they not? And then we had the feudalism, and of course you still had an underlying rebellion to that, so that were always ongoing. So then we get through to Edward I, who expanded what was England, and then you can get right up to Henry VIII then. The Rome, you could say, implemented their own, gave us another jurisdiction, but then the next, so you could say the 1500s was in preparation for the reset that were going to come at the Civil War. Because the Civil War reinstalled the merchants and undermined the so-called Christian monarchy here. And, you know, it was one of the first to be done in truth, because it was Napoleon that carried it out across Europe. So here they came, set up the naval headquarters and the financial headquarters in the pre-prepared city-state prepared by the Templars, called the inner city of London. So that's another reset, you can say, and it changed a lot of stuff. And from that, in the 1600s, they'd undermined the monarchy, and they were starting to build up the industrialist class. But of course, right across Europe and the British Isles, we were very rural in our makeup. Little towns and villages and hamlets everywhere, and then you had your cities. But the cities weren't huge things. Manchester wasn't a huge city, you know? So they weren't huge, but in general, the entire European mass, and in the United States, when that were kicking off, were all rural. It were agriculture. Everybody provided for themselves. And that obviously wouldn't work when you're trying to create industry. You want everybody into one area for the labour. Other industries come off that because they're spending money, etc., etc. So they couldn't have got industrial revolution going in any nation that wasn't ripe for being urbanised, as it were. And you can see that through the English Civil War, through the 1600s into the 1700s, was the preparation to bring in the Prussians or the Hanoverians. And onward it went. Then industry went off like a rocket. In came the Kabbalah. The secret societies were formed, and any existing guilds and societies, etc., were pretty much taken over, and the occult rites put on top of whatever were existing. So this they call the Enlightenment, remember, and you've got the Rosicrucians at the back of this running the theology, and the Masonic were moved into the to the building side of this occult system. And so they're moving through the 1700s to urbanise Europe, but more importantly, as we're talking about the British Isles, to urbanise the British Isles. So interesting. So then, so you've got this industry expanding. The secret societies are the mechanic. So we use the term industrialist, but really, if you're going back into ancient work, you'd use the term merchant. Same thing. Yeah? And then, of course, the Jesuits get kicked out of the Vatican, don't they? And there's a bit of a problem for the Catholic Church. They've lost a military wing. Now, this is the time that Illuminati was set up, which were interesting, I thought, because, you know, depending on how you come to this kind of data, depends on what you're seeing with it, kind of thing. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? So we just, I'll whisk you over to here. Oh, well, there we go. Sorry, guys, I just haven't set this up. I was rushing, actually. I ended up rushing like an absolute maniac. Oh, it's not there. Why are you not there? So Safari isn't showing up for some reason. That's a bit... Oh, there we go. Here we go. My apologies, I'm blind. So oh, it's not letting me do it like I did last week. You can't see that very well, can you? Hang on, if I try it like this, and then you do really need to see it, don't you? Right, so it's not letting me edit it. Alright. So we're not going to go through it a lot anyway, there's not much to say, but you look at this, and, you know, 1776, in an Enlightenment era secret society, it classed itself as. And Enlightenment we can equate with industrialists. So, of course, this was being set up by the industrialists, and I would say got the backing of the Jesuits, who had been thrown out. But, of course, all these Jesuit colleges still existed, and there were still people by Jesuits, kicked out as they were. So, Adam Weishaupt, 1748-1830, he became a professor of canon law and practical philosophy at the University of Ingolstadt in 1773, and he was the only non-clerical professor at an institution run by Jesuits, whose order Pope Clement XIV had dissolved in 1773. So, Jesuits have gone, kicked out of the church, they've been pulled into Corsica, invited into Russia with Catherine the Great, who's Anhalt, which is the German or the Prussian bloodlines, a very powerful bloodline. And then all of a sudden we have the Illuminati set up, and it's only tied to Catholicism at this particular time is the fact that he's operating from a Jesuit-run university. So we can see what it's really all about. So there's a bit of a misnomer, I think, when people go, oh, it's Catholic. No, it's Jesuit. And at this particular time, we have to remember, the Jesuits are no longer operating for the Vatican. I know they're reinstalled again, and then all hell breaks loose, and then we can see the next 100 years, the last 50 years or whatever, taking us up to 1850, when they began the new reset. So, he didn't like Freemasonry, he said it were expensive, and he founded his own society. So he really came from that background. So Freemasonry at this stage is well and truly underway, operating for the industrialists, the secret societies. Another major one that was set up over here in Blighty was the Lunar Society. It says the 18th century was a time of change and revolution across the world. Intellectuals and ordinary men alike would gather to discuss anything and everything, from the social order problems of the day to the latest scientific advances and the intertwining political and philosophical issues. Clubs were formed in order to allow members the pleasure of enjoying the finest food and wine whilst debating these issues with other like-minded individuals. So everybody thinks they're all great, fantastic, operating under Rosicrucian love and light, but really these are just societies and groups of very wealthy industrialists moving ever to urbanise the British Isles. So obviously that's destroying what was. It says the Lunar Society, or Lunar Circle as it was first called, was one such club. It met in and around Birmingham, England between 1765 and 1813. It was the members of this club, however, that would set it apart from any other. They chiefly referred to themselves as the lunatics, but this could not have been much further from the truth, as the revolutionaries involved would change the face of the world forever. It was exclusive, they were very choosy as who they'd have, and they would always have their meetings on a Monday. And there's just so many people in there that we were aware of. Josiah Wedgwood, he was stuck in with Darwin, they were intermingling, mating, breeding, screwed them all up. Wedgwood, of course, pottery. James Keir, William Small, mentor of Thomas Jefferson. They're all in there. William Murdoch worked for the Bolton and Watt and was the inventor of the gaslight. He ended his days living in the court of the Shah of Persia, where he was believed to be an incarnation of Marduk, the ancient god of light. So hand in hand with this industrial merchant class is the Babylonian system, which is why it was picked up by the Khazars, because they were picking up the version from the Persian Babylonian traders, the merchants, which is why we say it's not Judaism. This is something completely different, but it's managed to pretty much subvert everything and get itself in there as though it is actually the doctrine when it's not. So where am I now with this? So they have to destroy rural to get everything to urban, and they have to get everybody in the cities and dependent. Depends on the lifestyle, the money, and all the things you can buy in the city. But what we're actually doing, they were forced industrialisation by massing people together so they could kick off the war machine. You can't build a war machine, you can't rally people together if they're not already together in cities. So all this is about building the war machine. So, which is natural. The Prussians we're dealing with here. That's what it is. The Prussians aren't actually a nation. They're a war machine. They are a war machine. That's it, 100%. And so that's, once they've achieved that, then what did they do? Well, they set off little Corsican, who, according to Disraeli, who said that Napoleon was of this, well, he classed him as Jew, but of course we've discussed that this system isn't actually Jewish. It's Babylonian. So Napoleon, by nature, was off that priesthood, but more to the point, his wife was a Carolingian, not Merovingian. And again, you can see that bloodline system comes in via her as well. So everything Napoleon did was just another, it was the war side of things once he'd built up nations in Europe onto this war machine. So obviously they need to test it, put everybody into debt, and further the control, of course, because now we're getting up to 1815. Jesuits are back in, so the Prussians, this war machine system is now forced back into the Vatican, and now the Vatican is now, from the early 1800s, the British nation is under the House Rothschilds completely. So is the stock market. You can see these industrialists have completely and utterly took over the British Isles at the beginning of the 1800s there, and Napoleon cracks on then and annihilates all the existing monarchies across Europe, and then from that is installed the offspring of Queen Victoria, whom, if we go with Greg Allett's work, are all sired by a Rothschild, different ones. Nathan and I forget the other. Save for the one, her first child, because she'd sussed this game and wanted to make sure that she did have at least one legitimate. And that was the whole role of Greg Allett at the time. It went bad because, of course, he wasn't saying himself to be king. He was supposed to be bringing in this line of the first and original child of Victoria to supersede the Rothschilds, who was supposed to, according to Greg, give up the power after a 200-year stint, but they've negated on that contract. So Napoleon, at the end of his career, said, "I closed the gulf of anarchy and brought order out of chaos." So there we go, order out of chaos. It's not really a Freemasonic thing, is it, in its origin? But it's become that because, of course, these occultists, industrialists, merchant class, priesthood, Kabbalists, Zoharists, whatever you want to call them, pretty much created Freemasonry as we know it today, or at least all the rights above the third degree, the Master Mason, because of course that's where it ended when it was just a building guild. He also said, and this is important for what comes next, that he purified the revolution. Now, revolutions come out of this, but earlier than this. And revolutions is synonymous with the priesthood, which is why on England we've always used the term rebellion, because revolutions are bloody, revolutions are destructive, rebellions are not. This is why England as a realm was set up to give you the capacity to lawfully rebel, but it takes an amount of people to do that. You know, that's why it never works. There's never enough people coming together to do it. Everybody's off on their own thing, and that, you know, it's a sad indictment on people and the movement itself, where people are trying to move to actually change things. The minute you get groupie, all the egos come out, all the self-interest come out, and you can't communicate anymore. The communication just dies. It's a shame, it's really sad. Because if people have an aim, then regardless of character traits, beliefs, etc., if we all agree to the aim and put the effort into the aim regardless, then the aim would succeed. That's the problem. You get an aim together and then it just falls apart before it cracks on, because everybody's got their own thing. And it's a sad state of affairs, it really is. But we're looking at the Frankfurt group. You know, these guys are operating Tikkun Olam, which is basically licensed for the priesthood to destroy the entire world for God. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous but that is what sort of oversees this move that incorporates sabotage Zevi and doing sin to bring out the Mashiach. So this is where it's at, you know. The term Frankfurt School arose informally to describe those affiliated or merely associated with the Frankfurt Institute for Social Research. The Institute for Social Research, or Institute für Sozialforschung, my apologies for my terrible German, was founded in 1923 by Karl Grunberg, a Marxist legal and political professor at the University of Vienna, as an adjunct of the University of Frankfurt. It was the first Marxist-orientated research centre affiliated with major German university. However, the school traces its earliest roots back to Felix Well, who used money from his father's grain business to finance the institute. The real financial power behind the group was the American Jewish Committee. Now, this is the important bit for us to note. It says the Frankfurt School, which focused on what they termed critical theory. So we've heard that before. Race theory. All theories, Big Bang theory, all these theories emanate from this agenda that they have in using that to actually get something going. And it says, on what they term critical theory, which was a combination of Marxist analysis with Freudian psychoanalysis. In other words, they looked at existing European cultural elements and looked at how they could attack them to undermine and destroy them, using the population itself. Classed as Gentile, the European masses were seen as subhuman and therefore must be herded into line. You see? Can you see? And of course, these you're not going to get that into the minds of anybody, are you, really? Unless they're already up there and already see themselves as superior. But then you get into how they did this, and it says, as the theories took root, especially so with those under the influence of psychedelics, the theories became manifest as the hippies attacked every facet of what was their heritage. Christianity, capitalism, civil authority, the family, patriarchy, hierarchy, morality, tradition, sexual restraint, loyalty, patriotism, nationalism, hereditary, ethnocentrism, convention, and conservatism. And it took LSD to do that. So none of you were thinking straight, were you? You know what I'm saying? None of you were actually functioning with some great idea apart from being off your tits and hey man. And basically that's how they installed the critical theory system and embedded Marxism and psychoanalysis into society. So the 50s, I always said, the beatnik generation, they wrote the script for the 60s to follow. But it still took that LSD. And I never liked LSD, I have to say, back in them days when I were a rock and roll star. It never really gelled for me, but we did tend to just laugh a lot. So that's about it. But I didn't use that. I probably used it 3 or 4 times. I didn't like it. If I were dream questing, which were way after that, it were always with the shroom. Yeah, so, which is just as, well, nothing comes close, I don't think. But anyway, that's another sort of topic. And this is what this Frankfurt School were about. Funded out of the American Jewish Committee, slap bang into the British Isles and rock and roll. So that's basically what you've got. So you're holding these people up as heroes. You really need to think again. And of course the Wrecking Crew, which were the supreme musicians of the day, consistently jamming day in, day out, 24/7, pretty much wrote the hook lines and rhythms, etc., from nearly every tune that you've ever heard in the 60s. And then were dished out to whomever, even the Beatles. Was it Adorno? Was the man that wrote all the stuff or brought all the stuff to the Beatles. So there you go, in profile, blueprint for the New World Revolution, the spirit of militarism. Again, all works in sync. You've got Saul Alinsky's work. All this stuff on the revolution, which of course Napoleon said he purified it. So, yeah. Now, the global web of the Illuminati. Now, this is old school stuff that I loved back when I started out. First with books, and then when I got on the internet, I used to love watching their actual interviews and such. And so we've got Myron C. Fagan here, and he was a famous Jewish playwright. And he gives a documentary here, which is there. Let me just... It was today when I looked. Yep. I strongly advise, if you haven't watched that, watch it. Very enlightening, indeed. And he gives documentary evidence on how the House of Rothschild have moved to achieve a one-world government, he presents a hidden side to well-known historical events, which makes for a chilling listen. What he speaks of way back in the 1960s can be witnessed today as a plan coming to fruition. Says John Quincy Adams issued warnings exposing Thomas Jefferson to be using Masonic lodges to promote Illuminism in the United States. So Illuminism, as we've said, looking more like it was the merchant class installing themselves in the Vatican system after the Jesuits, the Rottweilers for the Vatican, had been kicked out. But obviously they were already subverted by then because they were operating contrary to everything. Anyway, so he says in 1826, Captain William Morgan, which is Morgan's rum. Yeah, Morgan's rum. So that's celebrating Captain William Morgan. Decided to explain to all Masons and the general public of the works of the Illuminati. The Illumined held a secret trial in his absence, in which he was sentenced to death for this treason. Richard Howard was tasked to carry out the execution at the border with Canada. This event led to over half of the northern jurisdiction Masons to secede their membership. So here you have a real Mason, obviously not happy with this occult side of it that had been installed on Freemasonry in the 1700s. You know, he carried enough weight that half of the northern jurisdiction Masons seceded the membership. You know, some Freemasonry hasn't always been what it's been for the last 20 years, which is the scapegoat. Yeah, I'm not saying it's not involved, but the general run of the boys at the front, they're just fronts for it. So they are involved with it, but they have no concept of the bigger games that are carried out in its name. Well, it wouldn't, would it? It wouldn't work as a scapegoat otherwise. It says the military staff of the UN shall be responsible through the Security Council for the strategic direction of all armed forces placed at the disposal of the Security Council. And that's the UN. Well, look, PESCO now. Our boys are under PESCO, which is Europe, which is UN. So the UN are taking the piss out of our boys. They've got their hand in our cabinet, especially when they had Truss in. Now you've got Sunak. Sunak visited Accrington this week. Amazing. He's coming up to say to everybody, you've got 20 million left up fund, blah, blah, blah. The council have decided to spend it, or most of it, on this shindig so they can nick the market all and claim it as their own. And they want to put food emporium in there for nobody that goes visiting. Nobody visits Accrington, it's shit, there's nothing to buy, basically. And then, right on cue, it was pictured in his car without his seatbelt on, chit-chatting away. And of course, being northerners, they sent a complaint to the police who had to issue a £500 penalty notice to Rishi. So, my guess is that 20 million might not arrive, or if it does, it'll probably be minus 500 quid. Unless, of course, Lancashire Constabulary will be telling fibs, and they haven't really sent a penalty notice out, they're just fibbing. So that's potential, but that were an interesting week up here in Accrington. Russia got done for no seatbelt, so that's another claim to fame we've got up here in the north. Anyway, that's enough of that malarkey. So what else did I have up there? Anything? No, we've done that. Yeah, alright. Oh, that's just one as well that I meant to do last week and forgot. So, just in case you want to know what's actually guiding our High Court judges in the corporate side, yeah, so the merchant side, is this book. It says God, Justice and Society, Aspects of Law and Legality in the Bible. So what I will do, of course, I'll put these up after. It says the United States of America, the corporation. We know how the priesthood have installed the NOAD platform each year under the chameleon they call Education Day. But until now, I have struggled to find the same evidence of its implementation inside the corporation, the United Kingdom. The method utilised in the UK comes from in the form of a book titled God, Justice and Society, Aspects of Law and Legality in the Bible by Jonathan Burnside, to which the High Court judges refer when dealing with man should one enter their court. This is the book that has been in service since 2010, upon which English judges twist biblical law against person. Well, that's not actually true. They can know they want on person, can't they? When you enter any court in the United Kingdom. I'm just wondering whether I've got that wrong. I shouldn't have put that when dealing with man. No, because it's. I'll have to double check because it is a while since I did this. 21 actually. So I might have to just double check that. It says this book is been in service 2010, upon which English judges twist biblical law against person. When you enter any court within the United Kingdom Corporation, man has to go as they enforce the sin of person upon all who enter the serpent's den, playing out in your public buildings. The 21st degree Freemasonry, we have the no hide judge, or no chart judge, it actually says, implementing the judging Christians under the Talmudic laws on behalf of priesthood. And does it work? Yep, it works. Hooray! A couple of these PDFs I've noticed not working. And then Seeking Norman Partington, which works a bit in sync with that. You might want to have a groovy at that old video as well. So that pretty much sorts that out. We've done Lunar Society. What's this? Defense of the Realm Act. What's this? Yeah, I'm so prepared, me. I could be an expert. I could be on BBC, couldn't I? I'm not prepared, let's be honest. Now, Landflucht. So this is the German side of things, as we've discussed how they were moving everybody off rural and into urban, and it was called Landflucht. Landflucht. Flight from the land refers to the mass migration of peasants into the cities that occurred in Germany and throughout much of Europe in the late 19th century. So this is the 1800s. So in the late 19th century, we're past 1850. That's when, so they set it all up that this could be done, and then they activated it in this 50-year game called Reset. So from 1850 onwards. The word landflucht has come as some negative connotations. It was coined by agricultural employers, often of the German aristocracy, who were lamenting the labour shortages due to depopulation of rural areas. So this again, you can see even the aristocracy are having the power stolen off them by this merchant class through these systems. Yeah? And then they do a reset. Which, you know, we have to take on board because that's all they're doing now. And we think, people think it's God ordained because they've managed to wrap it up and say, it's the end time stuff. This is what's happening. When really, it's a rehash of that prophecy, incorporated into scaring everybody to death, to join it and think they can't do anything about it. A bit like my mother told me when I asked her, you must have been taught this stuff. And she said, yeah, but the nuns never said we could do anything about it. They were all programmed that this was going to go happen, end of, shut up and get on with it. And I think that's what's probably happened in the entire Vatican system for a very long time, which has panned down into Church of England, etc., etc. So there we go. And Prussian prophecies, or Prussia is always on here, you know. So it is an actual mechanic that they employed, and it were written about, it were known about, but we don't look at these sorts of, we never look at this, do we, when we're looking into these things, we don't tend to look at it from these angles. So that's Napoleon done. And so they all left into the cities, and the purified revolutions, as Napoleon so claimed to have achieved, began in 1848. Now, when they were urbanising people, what they actually did at that point then was create the middle class. Yeah, so the system that we know today and they call democracy is nothing of the sort. It's an aristocracy, middle class, working class. And that's what they were setting up. So when they were urbanising it, that was the system you moved into. Now, they expected, once they set that up, they expected that the middle class would join with this system and move it forward at the expense of the working class. But what they found was that wasn't happening. So the middle class and the working class were all intermixed. But from 1848 What they were doing then, when they realised that, these purist revolutions, as Napoleon called them, began to sort of separate the middle class from the working class, to massage the middle class to work in favour of the industrialists, the industrial class, yeah? Because remember, this is before Queen Victoria's on the throne, all the changes that are going on. We've got Crimea, yeah, you've got Boer Wars, so they've militarised everything, they've achieved all that, they've urbanised, so they've moved everybody out of the rural into the urban cities, they've got industry going on, they've got military building up, yeah, there's money being built. And these revolutions then separated the middle class from the working class. Yeah, so then you've got all your unions starting to kick off as well. So they were controlling the working class through the unions, you know, the middle class through their own unions or whatever method they had at this time. And what we could see then that there were the socialist ideology started to get shoved in here, which of course the unions are a big part of, and of course the Fabian Society had a lot to do with the starting of the unions. Actually, you could say it was the commanding level of the union system all the time. And the Fabian Society was set up in Adelphi House. You know, that uber seat of capitalism that all the socialists trigger. So that was set up in the same place. So was London School of Economics. Yeah? It's two arms of the same force again. And then we can see that. Look at a lot of what... So another thing as they did as well, back in these times under Napoleon, they wanted to rebuild a lot of Europe because they wanted smaller streets so that people couldn't barricade the streets. So a lot of these designs, a lot of the destruction that they do is they've obviously worked out flaws in the plans, they've loopholes, ways that they can be defeated. And so a lot of times then, these destructions are required in order to get rid of them. So back in the day, if you remember, everybody was tunneling everywhere. There were tunnels all over the shop when Civil War were on and after, by all sides at different times. So tunnels were everywhere. They had means and methods of avoiding such. And these are the systems that obviously they realised were not working to their advantage. And a lot of the times they demolish these things, these towns, these cities, whatever, and rebuild them in accordance with the planned reset. So you can see that they do a lot when they're doing these resets. And killing folks, a big part of that for a long time, for 100 years, getting it together, and then they launch it, and it's a 50-year gig. And so we get from that well, wait a minute, I'll tell you what I haven't done, which we need to look at, because it's in sync with this. So I go screen capture, I knock that off, you guys should be able to see images. So this is going through some of that Substack paper, Theatre Kid, Occupied Government, by a guy who calls himself Schwab, I don't know who it is exactly. That even a larger scale reset took place during World War II. The secular religion was almost completely revised between 1935 and 1945. A greater part of the American right was unpersoned or cancelled or deleted from the public perception. Huge scandals forgotten, widespread corruption forgiven, criminals lionised, an entire corpus of right wings positions transformed. See, this is what they're doing now, aren't they, when they're scrubbing history? They're putting themselves up as these saviours, but to do that they have to scrub their history so this new generation see them as fantastic. When in real terms, they're from the sickest, most putrid families that have ever existed on the planet. You know? There were then certain theatrical elements that still demand your absolute unquestioning immersion to this day. We are commanded to never forget. However, the last great reset, similar to the one we are experiencing today, occurred sometime between 1850 and 1900. The exact dates are impossible to pin down due to lack of records. So they get rid of all the records. Bit like 9/11. Building 7. What were it full of? All the financial transactions, CIA, FBI records from the 70s and 1980s, even maybe back as far as the 60s, gone. and that were Building 7. Regardless, we can see the evidence of large-scale stagecraft in the form of world fairs. So what he's saying is, what he's brought to the table here with this is that when they were doing this urbanisation, when they got it together, they started up world fairs. Because this is how they ritualised people to the programme. So we could say with Hitler, we saw it as rallies, didn't we? Well, if you look into any of them rallies from an occult perspective, the majority of Hitler's speeches with the red, the white, the light shining up were perfect rituals to Mars, to invoke Mars. And that Hitler's aide, I read a lot of one of Hitler's aide's work, and he said in one part that he saw Hitler more as a conduit, like a medium. The majority of the time he was just a normal as you'd expect a guy to be, albeit delusions of grandeur, etc. But then when it came to these particular instances, he became this superhuman energy, as though something was working through him. And that, so you look at these Hitler rallies where you've got the red, white, and black. You've got the searchlights up to the sky, creating. So that creates the ritual space, etc. And then through him, this evil, dark energy would come out through his heart chakra and hit everybody in the crowd. Of course, now they've got the television. This is why it's so much more simple. What they used to have to take great efforts to do, today it's all done through the television. He says, so they did this in that time through creating fairs and exhibitions. Remember, we're dealing in the Enlightenment, Rosicrucianism, so there's this great... And that's what the jingle jangle was, to get people into it. So they've got them together as urban, and now they're pulling them together. And also, at this point, once they'd achieved this urbanisation, this is when they started to implement the idea of race. So Germans are to see French as French, French to see Germans as Germans, to Britain, to blah, blah, blah. You get me? So they were installing that. In this time, the idea of race and difference. You know, I can well see how it would have been before in Europe. It didn't matter where you go, you were welcomed by everybody. You might have problems if you didn't speak the lingo, etc. But in the main, the probably only separation you had was actual lingo. And the people were actually happy to learn about other people's culture, etc. and enjoy it rather than defeat it, take over, conquer, all this shit stuff from that, lower nature of us below the heart chakra. Fairgoers were issued passports and given notebooks to record their indoctrination experience. The notion that these events were focused on entertainment is nowhere evidenced in the photographs of sullen attendees, dwarfed by the oversized grounds purposely built out of the human scale. Commentators in 1851 expressed particular surprise at the seriousness of the event. As Humphrey Jennings noted, the fact is the Great Exhibition is to them more of a school than a show. What was a matter of tedium and became ultimately a mere lounge for gentlefolks is used as a place of instruction by the people. Eventually, however, this mass indoctrination ritual became disguised as entertainment. By the time of the Columbian Exposition in Chicago, in May of 1893, P.T. Barnum was given suggestion, make it bigger and better than any that have preceded it. Make it the greatest show on earth, greater than my own great moral show, if you can. Now, when I was growing up, 70s, scouts were always having fairs, churches were always having fairs, clubs were always having fairs. This is what we can remember this. So all this that we grew up with was still the sort of the last remnants of what they kicked off after the Napoleonic Wars. In the urbanisation, how they got people together and they could program them. So again, you can see this game. What they did then, look at what they've done now. It's all techie. Same game, different mechanics, because obviously they've got different toys in the mix. The scale of technological advance was enough to mystify and enthrall the crowds into the 1870s. However, when exhibitions were becoming the norm throughout Europe, technology alone could no longer be relied on to fill a site. In order to prevent disaster through non-attendance at these later events, organisers gave attention to popular entertainment. This grew as a dimension of exhibitions markedly during the 1880s until it came to the dominant socio-economic factor on the site. So entertainment now is coming in the game. In 1851, the only real elements identifiable specifically as mass entertainment, apart from refreshment facilities, were concerts given by orchestras and brass bands. By 1890, the situation had dramatically changed, and by 1900, the entertainment side of the exhibitions had gained so much ground that education, commerce and propaganda had to be disguised as pleasurable activities. Now that's interesting because also you've got to remember, just a bit later than this, they fused swing and blues and gave us jazz. And that then was, so from furs to entertainment, and jazz was the conduit, especially amongst the aristocracy. And they also, that you can see, they installed the Schofield Bible. So the Schofield Note Believers kicked off there. England didn't have it, so they set up Cecil Hotel. And the Masonic side of things were bringing over all the American students and getting them to join, not the York Rite, believe it or not, the Scottish Rite, a Freemasonry. The new one, the new version, which were incorporating Cyril Schofield's notes, which became Zionism and Jesuitism, or rather, Jesuitism became Zionism, you could say. Bearing in mind, the Jesuitism of which I speak isn't of the Vatican, it's coming out of the Prussian system, specifically Corsica and through the Russian side of things. So, as Burton Benedict has explained, the national competition element in World's Fairs was siphoned off by the Olympic Games. So now, in comes the Olympic Games. Yeah, because that can go, that's global, is it not? So this is where you can get why it's so twisted. And it's back to Rome, isn't it? Give them games, and they're not looking. You've got, how many males are obsessed with football? They don't actually, apart from the job and whatever functions they have to carry out at home, they don't actually do fuck all. Because the majority of the time that they're not grafting, they're watching football, they're watching reruns of football, they're talking football, they're getting pissed talking football. Do you know what I'm saying? Completely and utterly taken out the game. 100%. The second, third and fourth Olympic Games were all held in conjunction with international expositions. Paris 1900, St. Louis 1904 and London in 1908. The Olympics grew and began to take on the characteristics of World Fairs. World's Fairs ceased. I don't know whether I carry that on, actually. No, I don't carry that on, so ignore the World's Fairs ceased. It says, the use of mass public rituals has always been the conventional method for consolidating power. Its grammar is well known. Public rituals have been thoroughly established during the Middle Ages and eventually systematized into the cybernetic theatre. Legitimating narratives and public psychodramas were a necessary measure for an increasingly degenerated and alienated elite. As late as the 19th century, there were a considerable number of cultural performances in which the elite participated, as for instance, weddings, funerals, religious services, national festivals, and so on. So now, today, what have they got all kids in? It's gaming, innit? It's all the gaming. It's all... That's where it's at for the majority. So the next generation, it's... they've got them in the metaverse. They don't know any different. There are many other bizarre factors surrounding the World's Fairs and the last Great Reset. The most salient is the control of children, right? Which is manifest in the technical construction of modern public education. The strange epidemic of orphan children and the even more bizarre presentation of unaccounted for incubator babies as an attraction at many of the fairs and expositions. In today's grooming culture and the many efforts of globalist organisations and other oligarch proxies to separate children from the parents, we see many parallels. Through prosecution of all these suspicious circumstances, is beyond the scope of this article. It's always about the children, isn't it? That's why they've knocked off all the old folks. You know, grandmas are no longer there and granddads to pass on their knowledge to the grandchildren. The conversion into a society of sodomic consumption was completed by the 1939 World Fair, an economy based on unsatisfiable wants, not on need or product quality. The world of tomorrow was primarily represented by merchandise, so consumerism is born. Designed, produced, displayed and distributed with no restraints and no borders. Edward Bernays, using the methods of mass psychology, worked with many of the corporations on their exhibits for the fair to promote a vision of democracy based on satisfying consumer needs as the truest form of patriotic duty. See, yeah, there you go, 1939, then what happened? War. You got it in, got it on, got it working, bang. Change everything, kill a shitload of people. After the war, just launch it all. Nobody knows any different. Nobody remembers any different. And then when it comes to the urbanisation, you can see how successful it were. It says, Table 1, the share of urban population in various European countries and regions at different time points during the 19th century. So in England, urbanisation accounted for 20.3%. In 1850, it had jumped to 40.8%, so it doubled. And in 1890, they managed to get 61.9% of the English population out of rural and into urban. Belgium, from 18 to 34. Germany, from 5.5 to 28.2. Look at that. They've really gone for it in England, haven't they? Look at the state of that. Germany, yeah, we've done France from 8.8 to 25.9. Spain, 11.1, 26.8. Italy, 14 to 21. Netherlands, 28 to 33, so they'd had a good job in there as well. Portugal, 8.7 to 12.7. Scandinavia, 4.6 to 13.2. Switzerland even, 3.7 to 1600. 16. And the total of Europe from 10% originally up to 29%. But look at that, England, from 20%, which was still quite big, actually, for England. We're England and Belgium. And Netherlands looks, well, Netherlands, you can expect that because it's on water. But England and Belgium, even in the early 1800s, were quite urbanised. But look at the jump in England, 61% by 1890. That's a lot. That is a real lot of people that went on with this shindig. My God. So, there we go. Resets. They're nothing new. They're nothing new at all. And we need to look at this as it is, because when you look at that Davos, you know, on some parts you can get the gist that they're having problems. Me personally, I'm hoping that we're going to get a delay. Enough things are not working together properly and we might get a delay announced. I don't know. Maybe we'll know more when they try and shift from the LIBOR to the other one. The liquid assets into the metaverse. That might be the deciding factor. Let's hope it collapses. So if there's hackers out there, you need to be looking at that system and blowing it apart. Because until they get that in, they can't move forward with they can't collapse it all financially. They've got to keep, and they can keep it going forever, folks. They're printing the money, remember. There's no end to it when you're printing the money. You know, this idea that, oh my God, there's nothing we can do. It's utter garbage. They could print everything tomorrow to pay off every debt and start again. That'd be a good reset. Would it not? That would be a good reset. So what else did I have there on this? No, that's pretty much it on the reset that I wanted to just discuss with you, because when we look at it like that, there is a potential to stop it. A real potential. It's not the end of the world, end times stuff. That's the futurist side. It's piggybacking on the fact that all you're actually doing is reorganising the world to their end, which has been going on for millennia. What's this Babylon? Which is why it's called the Great Work of the 80s. So, And I forgot to talk to you guys at the beginning. So it's interesting stuff, but to me, you've got to get out of this idea that there's nothing we can do. You've got to placate it. It's just bullshit. You don't need to placate it at all. Because, their intent is to kill as many people as they can. And that includes you. It includes your children. It includes, your brothers, your sisters, your neighbours, everybody you know, your work colleagues. And, if you want to get an insight to that, I suggest you go back and read the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Yeah? Because Zion wasn't actually... Zion is Zohan. And it was the place of King Duat or Sosthenes. Zohan, which they termed Zion, because Sosthenes could in fact be King David. Okay? When you look at this stuff, especially you look at the work of Josephus expands on so much of the Old Testament stories to the point you can actually see that Josephus he uproots this idea of some kind of sacred Judaism and Babylonianism as sacred. He puts it squarely at the feet of Egypt. And you've got to understand the Hyksos for that. You've got to go back and look and understand these Hyksos shepherd kings. Who were they? Because they invaded Egypt. They were despised by Egypt. They became powerful and they became pharaohs in their own right in their part of Egypt. Shepherd. Yeah. So you're looking, we get shepherd, don't we? You're looking at Old Egypt representing the bull and Taurus, the age of Taurus. That these Hyksos were the people coming in on the ram, so shepherds. So into the age of Pisces. Aries, my apologies. And of course, from then it moved into the fish, did it not? Pisces, which is the time of Jesus or Yeshua, yeah? So it all just makes sense, but just as we discussed before, so we looked at the archaeological evidence for the existence of Israel beyond 700 BC, because it isn't there. I found Egypt speaking of the Israelites, but not in any term as though they were a nation, just a group of very, let's say, capable people, but they weren't classing them as a nation or even a race. So they were sort of an amalgam, which does work in sync with 10 tribes. But the interesting thing is, if you go with the Exoduses, there were two. The first one was when the Hyksos were kicked out. They were kicked out of Egypt by the Egyptians. And what they did is move into the Levant. Okay? So, history says Egypt controlled the Levant. Well, not really. The Hyksos that had been thrown out of Egypt had control of the Levant, and they classed themselves as pharaohs. Right? So I would suggest that the Judeans, the Judahites, the ones that went into captivity, were actually of these Hyksos. Because the Judahites are the ones, through Ezra, that have rewritten all the traditions to put Judah on top of the Israelite tradition, when clearly Judah and Israelites hated each other. And Judah was always trying to take over the Israelite tradition. So this would make sense if the Hyksos are actually the Judeans, that if these Israelites are an amalgamation of either the Egyptians that fled Egypt when Akhenaten had power, under the Aten, which is one of the Psalms, isn't it? One of the Psalms is actually a prayer to Aten. So it's in there. So the Israelites from 700 AD, when there was evidence for it, could well be either those that fled Akhenaten and regrouped at the top side of the Levant so that they weren't amongst the Hyksos. Immediately then, the Hyksos, being Pharaohs himself, would be claiming command of the Israelites, wouldn't they? As a constant the entire time the Israelites were there, I would suggest. Or, as we sort of explored in that live stream, that a lot of what we call Israelites could have been the remnants of Akhenatans, because they got thrown out. They got thrown out as well. So I just think it's interesting that it could be that the Hyksos, the Shepherd Kings, or actually the Abrahamic tradition, and they've thrown themselves on top of whatever the real tradition of the Hebrews or the Israelites was. So that was something I've been thinking about this week, actually, because you get into Abraham and he had 318 servants and 318 military commanders. Now, a military commander has a cohort, you're looking at 30,000 troops. He also states he had a weapon. So this guy's no guy on the street, some old guy like, ooh, this guy was a serious piece of kit. And he was a Chaldean. So, again, is it making sense? Is it starting to make sense as to why and how the House of Judah has commanded the Israelite tradition in the minds of men for a very long time, or at least since Ezra? I don't know. But I just thought it's interesting. We need to... So Josephus, you need to look at some of Manetho's work if you want to get a bigger insight in support of what it is I've just presented to you. Psalm 104 is the prayer to Aten. So Akhenatans is in there. That can't be ignored. These things have to be understood, because it's important we understand that there's two creations. One's man, one's person. I've presented to you in these live streams over a few years now that there's a difference between man and person. It's a massive difference. And that the Genesis 1 is the authority for man, and the garden is the authority for persons. So that's why it's important. So the statutory declaration, as I've encouraged you to look at, to understand, to grasp, is again, all works together. So you fully understand where your authority works coming from, what it means to be man, and what is the difference between that jurisdiction and persons. Because that is the system of the damned. It is Osiris' underworld, and it's going to hell. Is it not? So some people are placating it. So guys out, and a lot of people are saying, yeah, there's shills everywhere. Look, yes, there are a lot of them, but try looking at it in this way. That there are 3 jurisdictions and therefore 3 methods in their system. Yeah? And so many of these personages are operating particularly on a jurisdiction. So, if your knowledge base is in the crypt, which is the magistrates' courts, you will understand what they're doing in maritime. Just as the maritime and the crypt jurisdiction will not understand the ecclesiastical acts and moves. So I think there could be a bit of confusion going on there in some cases, whereas people are not recognising that there are people out there that are having success because it's a real mechanic, but they're actually operating in different jurisdictions. And if you can absorb that, it will help you to, again, see through those that are shilling, those that just want your money, those that just want to carry it away, pipe you down a dead-end path where you're going to learn nothing, and in a lot of cases, put yourself in a much worse position than you're actually in now. So there are a lot of dangers with that, but just thought I'd add that as well, because a few experiences I've had this week pretty much showed me that, it's another reason again why folks can't come together. with one aim, because people are coming from different jurisdictions. Now, if we could amalgamate that knowledge and see the system for what it is, might not be a problem there. Because, I mean, you look at it, you've got your magistrate system. So basically, your freemen, when they came out at first, were attacking that crypt. So basically, they were going in court in a coffin. Every now and again, they'd lift their head up and go, rah, 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 rah. Judges would be like, oh, this guy knows a little bit of something. But still, and then you lie back down in your coffin. But then, because no matter what you do in that lower jurisdiction, you're a corpse. You're dead. Your next level, maritime admiralty, is mainly contract. So the contract is the law. And then you've got ecclesiastical jurisdiction, where you're coming in from the religion. So as we look through Pope Francis saying, the Christian name belongs to God, your surname belongs to the church. So in the ecclesiastical jurisdiction, you're holding on to your Christian name registered with the church once baptism's done, and you're giving up your rights to the surname because you didn't create it. But then you're all under ecclesiastical jurisdiction. You better know your Bible, which is why judges won't come out a third time, because of the motu proprio given out by Francis some time ago, basically telling them you're on your own. Don't fanny around. You can't muck around in that jurisdiction. So it started to make sense, I think, and also a bit of clarity for me in relation to why a lot of these groups that in essence have got the same aim but can't pull it together. But also there's a lot of people out there as well who are out for the self, they're out for money, what they can achieve, and they'll talk shit to you all day if you're going to throw some money at them. And the proof of that pudding then would be in the fact if you've given and then you're blocked out. I mean, you couldn't get a more succinct example of that in play. So if these groups are doing that, you know where to put them. If it's just that you can't understand what they're doing, then at least acknowledge that it could be because you are at a disadvantage in understanding what they're doing. Maybe if we approach things in that way, we may get to a point where us, as all off on our own individuals doing our thing, can actually come together in a common cause. And instead of hiding, trying to find to keep for ourselves, we can share data that'll give us that platform and that grammar to do so. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And it needs to be looked at that way because, we're not getting anywhere, are we, really? And well, we are because people are waking up. But physical, get guts on the... It's not really going on, is it? And then they are doing it. They're doing it wrong. They're in the crypt. They might as well get in a coffin and put the selling court with the paperwork. It's not being heard. It's... anyway. So... right, back to the beginning. God, sorry, guys, I forgot again to sort of chat with you. It says, last pillar says, hello, Sean. Hello, everyone. Looking forward to this. Well, I hope it satisfied you a bit there. I hope I didn't go off on one. Because I've actually winged that. I've winged that like you would not believe. So if it's all right and gone down well, that's kudos to me. So I thought, well, we'll try it. And I've winged that completely. So hopefully it's made sense. Paul Sefton says, good evening, Sean and everyone. Louise Burnett says, can person be legally defined, Sean? It's a title, isn't it? Attached to your manhood. And it's created as a trust situation, which then invokes a three-part system. They want you to be trustee, when in fact you're actually the beneficiary. So it can be legally defined, yes. And well, the one video that I did do that gives you a real solid grasp on title is the video I did on title, understanding title, I think. I can put it under this for you, Louise, so you can find it after. But that is a good entrance into understanding title, how they're playing with title, and what it actually means for you. So yeah, it can only be legally defined because it's a legal entity. It's a fiction, fake, fantasy. A bit like now we know metaverse is a fantasy. Same thing. First they attach that fantasy to everybody. For pets mean prizes. Once you've got you all urbanised and these furs all together, seeing race, it's clever how they've done this, isn't it? But it falls onto us, especially falls onto those in our institutions that were supposed to be protecting us from this. PY Music says, evening all, evening Paul. All his Atom says, evening Mucker, evening to you. House of CCC, greetings all, greetings to you. Council of Nice Ears, Council of Nice Ears, I like that. Very good Sunday evening, live in the mix and chat. Jace has got a love art with hands on. Who are you looking at? He's looking at Council of Nice Ears. What's going on there then? Untitled says, hello Sean, good man. Good evening to you, Untitled. Jay says, haha, good on you, man. Untitled, hello to all. Howdy, Mew Pit. Council Near Seer says, just saw The Good Shepherd a couple of days ago. Quite revealing for a movie, outlining the beginning of the CIA. Really? The Good Shepherd? That's interesting. Could you put a link up onto this chat so everybody can achieve that? If that's easy enough for you, please, Council. Jay says, bye, Den, 2 homes. They found more, haven't they, in another one? Oh, he's on his way out, and it's what they're going to do in the meantime. Who's Council of the Nice Ears outlined. Cos says, a green ginger. A green ginger. Don't know what you're saying there, Chuck. Aliens with ginger ale? Uh-huh. So Jay says, once a day for how long? Once a day? What have I missed? I know I'm way behind on now, sorry. The challenge was 0 phone. Challenge was 0 phone. Hello, Mine Racer. Mine Racer says, hi, well done, Mew Pit, blah, 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 evening all. Says June. Council of Niceties. It seems the rest cycle shorten as we have progressed through the linear timeline. Let me read that again. It seems the reset cycles shorten as we have progressed through the linear timelines. Perhaps because of the technology, eh? But then, well, there's a lot more people in there. Or is there? I don't know. Yeah, I think you're right there, definitely. But then they've still given themselves 50 years for this one, haven't they? So maybe each at its time is as huge as what we're witnessing. You know what I mean? Because Methodism, when I investigated that immensely, went all over Macclesfield, everywhere, where it started, people, the connections. Basically, Methodism as a construct was to shift Christians off, give unto Caesar, into we'll work in the pits and the mines and the industry for Jesus, for nothing. And that's basically what Methodism did. And that's the birth of the Sunday schools. So, supreme method of programming. It's a revelation of a very different variety. Is revelations of a very different variety. I'm not sure I understand that, Council. Is revelations of a very different variety. Is that more meant to say his? If you could just explain that underneath, and I'll get to it when I come through these. Thanks, Joe. Would you like to interview Brashears live in the mix? I don't think Jason would be up for that. I don't know. I have commented a couple of times in the past, but it would be interesting to talk to him. Yeah, definitely, because he knows his stuff, and I'll give him his due. The guy, you know, he knows what he's talking about. Whether it's just a bit too much, we do know they have resets. But just going off this data, I'm not so sure that they were expecting a Phoenix event. These are the resets, unless they are working and that under. So I don't know. We'll have to maybe look at that. But yeah, I'd love to. To be honest with you, chaps, right? There's a lot of people who I'd like to interview. There's a lot of people who've offered. There's been a lot of suggestions, and Streamlabs actually, you can. I can send you a link and you can come in on your camera. I don't understand how that works yet, but once I do, then that's exactly what I'd like to do, to interview folk. In the realm of what you can do on YouTube. And of course, if that goes well, then I might start interviewing people on touchy subject matter for my own website. So it wouldn't be on any of these platforms, I'd just stick it on the website. But I'd need to start that first, because it's quite hard. When I did that with Adam, if you remember back in the day, it's actually quite a difficult job to interview somebody. It's difficult, and I find it rather difficult, which is why I haven't rushed to do it again. It weren't because I didn't enjoy it and Adam weren't a great guest. He was a great guest and he made a lot of sense. But I found it really, really, really difficult to actually... because when you're interviewing somebody, they can go off and off and off, and your job is then to break it and bring it back into thing. So it's definitely an art form, and I sort of realised that I didn't have it. But yeah, so at some point down the line, I would like to do it. Or you could do Zooms, but I'd have to wait till I've got a better camera, because the Zoom cameras the Zoom images are shit. But if you've got a better camera, I think you might get a better. Then it'd be worth using Zoom for that, but it's just it's low grade quality when you're playing it back. Was the Bible just a business plan? I'd say absolutely, especially the King James, because the King James Bible is the law of the system, the beast. That's what it is. 36,000 translation errors. They've missed out big chunks of words like created man, created he them, male and female created he them. That bit's missing. Why? It's important. You can't understand the context if that's missing. So I would say the King James Bible is exactly the Bible of commerce, which is why you can placate it. There's remedy in it. So I would say so. The original stuff is definitely a business plan, because what does it do? It bigs up specific men, bloodlines, continued, and you were supposed to sit there and go, yeah, God said no. It's man makes a claim and nobody manages to rebuff it, and if they do try and rebuff it, they get snotted. That's what kings do. That's what popes do. Yeah, that's what muftis do. Emperors, caliphs. That's what they all do. They claim a right. Anybody wants to say no, they get battered. So it's like I set up a gang there and say, right, fuck it, I own England. Anybody says no, we just snot them. Until there's nobody saying no. That's exactly the format of Islam. It is the house of war. Absolute. Peace only occurs when everybody's Muslim. And that is, again, I've said this to Muslims before, it's one of your Achilles heels. You've got many, because it breaks all international law. It breaks every single law of every nation you're in, even though your Quran tells you have to obey the laws of the nation you're in. You know, you've got so many Achilles heels, and the problem is you're not recognising them. Like Christians don't recognise theirs and Jews don't recognise theirs. That's a problem. It's a problem. Because you're always moving to placate it. It's the easiest way, isn't it? It's least resistance, which is what most people always go for, don't they? No matter what it is. Although the Quran isn't an outright in detail in the MO. I mean, it's a day-to-day book to run your lives, but then there's a lot of things in there that are Talmudic, a lot. But also remember, Muhammad didn't write the Quran. It was penned by people that, when you start to get into the Shia-Sunni split, need to be looked at by Muslims, because some of the stuff are rather perturbing, to say the least. But the majority of the mover of Islam today is the Surah and the Hadith as commentaries. It's the commentaries that are the problem. Yeah, this is another thing. It's like me. I'm not interested in commentaries. If I want to go and study something, I want to go and study it raw. Not everybody tell me what it means and then I study it and go, oh yeah. No, I want to see it and I want to absorb it. And what does it say to me? What am I seeing? Then we're on board, and I found that to work well because I'm comfortable in what I speak about it. I'm not. A lot of people that preach this stuff, whatever, you can see that they're not convinced of what they're preaching unless they know the higher levels of like secret society stuff. If you're at that level, you know what it is and how it's being manipulated. They're solid. There's no doubting them when they're preaching their stuff. But the Quran, there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of information in the Quran, or knowledge, that we don't want to lose. That the other religions are doing everything they can, not necessarily to lose from their own lives and use, but to remove from you down there. That's going on. But there's a lot of stuff in the Quran that's valid and makes sense. In the same way, in all these books that religions are based on, there's always got to be loads and loads of sense in it. It wouldn't work, and people wouldn't take it on board. So, yeah, I mean, I don't attack the Quran. I don't attack Muhammad. I don't attack any of the prophets of any of them, because then I'd be falling foul of one of my own maxims, which is, do not focus on the person, focus on the message. And I do. I'm not particularly interested in the personages of whomever I'm studying. I just want to know what they're saying. And because if you study anybody, and study them long enough, you'll take their energy, because they're passing that energy of themselves in the words. But this is where it's important. Neither Jesus nor Muhammad penned the works. So you're not getting the energy from Yeshua and the energy from Muhammad. We're getting the energy from other people's understanding of what we're going on, what we're said. And that, to me, again, is a major self-delusion that people have when they're studying anything. We're not just talking about doctrine here, we're talking about science, we're talking about anything. I mean, if you're going cold to a tradition, you're not going to understand it, because there's going to be so many words in there that you haven't got a clue what they mean. You know, there's like a key before you go into anything. Because if you don't have the key, you're not going to grasp the grammar. You're not going to get it. It's not going to make sense to you. As I learned way back in the day. And then I started, you get a subject and then you go right back into it. And that's when you can, but very few people will do that. Your philosophers would do that. That's why they're philosophers. They'll spend every day doing that, you know. And they had vast libraries to go to. There's still a lot of vast libraries around today, but you have to pay, and they're online. You know, but you still don't know whether you're getting an edited version. Then you have to take 2 paragraphs out, don't they? And you're off the mark from the initial essence of what was trying to be transmitted. Zelensky is from Polish nobility. Oh, it's definitely high up, absolutely. Is it Polish? Is it Polish? Netanyahu, same. Yeah. Sean will surely share his thoughts on that. Zelensky. On what? Apocalypse, Jay says. Apocalypse means revealing. Remember that. Don't mix up apocalypse with Armageddon. Which 99% of Christians I ever speak to, you can tell with what they're saying, think the apocalypse means Armageddon. Apocalypse means the great revealing. That's what's going on, is it not? Are we not revealing? So we're all operating with the apocalypse. Pluto. Because Pluto is the great revealer. Yeah? So that's what's going on if you want to take it astrological. This is what's going down, and it's cyclical. Yeah, things go on and then they're revealed. Everybody gets to know. They're resetting. Is there enough force, power, people awake to actually stop the reset? Obviously, so far we haven't. First World War, Second World War, none of that nonsense. Because the reset, you can say, was to bring on the works of Albert Pike, the Three World War strategy. Would that not be fair to suggest? Council of Nice used during that period Islam as a force was also being instituted as a system. Well, of course, there's obviously elites behind Islam, like there's elites behind Christianity, there's elites behind Judaism. These elites are families. And once Muhammad died, they were all killing each other. They were all falling out all over shop. Same when Alexander. So the powers behind these religions are those people, those bloodlines. All of them. But more importantly, remember, you're not getting the essence of Muhammad, you're not getting the essence of Yeshua when you read these Gospels, because they weren't penned by them. You know, you pass on your energy, an essence of energy when you write, when you talk. Even your image passes on an energy, it invokes. You know, you're looking at somebody's image, it invokes a feeling that it's a passing of frequency, of energy. Yeah? So so you're not getting the energy of either. You're just getting somebody else's grasp on it, put together, agreed, off they go. So these resets are major upheavals across the board, across the earth. And I think some of them, a lot of times, have just been in certain areas, depending on where the empire is operating and trying to fix itself. Now, today, it's global, isn't it? They've got the whole globe connected. They've managed to succeed in the great work of the ages, which is pull together the entire world because they want to destroy everybody because they want it for themselves. They're not hiding that in their doctrine. They want the world for themselves. Well, the earth for themselves is what they want. And that's it. Make no mistake about it. That's what they want, and that's what they're intending to do. And they're doing well, let's say. Bank runs have begun. Where have bank runs begun? Cities equal beehive symbolism, yep. Nothing has changed. Bank runs have begun. Where, Chuck? Adam Weishaupt equals George Washington. Ooh, interesting. I'm not so sure. I mean, you can trace George Washington back to here. You know what I mean? You can trace his family. There's a lot known about the Washington family. Jay says a revolution is 360 degrees. Go back to where we started a revolution. Or get retarded. Well, they've been retarding us, haven't they? Let's be honest. Ever heard Peter Hammond? Not that I'm aware of. And that's A. An African preacher talks about history. Okay, that'd be interesting. No, if anybody's got a link, send me. I'll be happy to look at what he has to say. What's his spiel? I like the history about revolution on World War I. Edward VII, he was the architect of that. He changed Freemasonry. He put England, Scotland and Wales under the Hanseatic League and it's Israel. Andrea says, evening Sean. Evening Andrea. A truth talker, not in the club. I like the history revolution. Not in the club. Certainly not in any clubs. AGM, the sign of life is Christ, not an Egyptian ink cross. AGM, the sign of life is Christ, not an Egyptian ink cross. Well, life is a frequency, and it's up here, inside of you. The kingdom within. You know, this I can't compute when I'm talking to so-called Christians, and they're off on this outside thing and claiming it to be Christ. Well, Christ said all the frigging time, the kingdom of my Father is within. I didn't say it. I didn't make it up. That's what he said, according to them. So, a forced identity. You are on point, mate. Well, thank you, sir. Press like. Says, hey, is there an Amorite Egyptian connection? I think the Egyptian empire were global, personally. And I don't think it was just classed as where we see Egypt. It were in America, Grand Canyon, prime example. Unless that were those that have fled South America. I mean, what do we know about South America? It's jungle. But each time they go, oh, it's satellites, there's cities. So something major happened there. Go Phoenix if you like with Jason Bashir's then. You know what I mean? Hi Sean, Treen. Hey, Treen, are you right, darling? Hi Sean, everyone missed most of this one, so I'll go back on it. He says, wow, Sean running late, but here, anyway, alleged Davos is also the name of a minor deity from around the Alps region. Is it? LL says, thanks, L. Louise Burnett, thank you, Sean, for what you do. You're more than welcome, Louise. Will that cover the person act? Have a look at it, Chuck. Pull together whatever you can on person and then look at it. I've got quite a few different things on it as well. I can supply you with them if you want to send me an email. Transpocalypse is here. Thanks for sharing. You are welcome, sir or lady. The Good Shepherd says Matt Damon. Matt Damon. He's an actor, isn't he? Is that Jason Bourne? I used to be Jason Bourne, and then I was that legacy guy. He was better. Isn't he ill, him? He's ill, isn't he? Good actor, I like him. When is that Phoenix event? According to Jason, first 2040 in the east, then 2046 here, and then the big one, I think he's got down at 2070 or 76, one of them two. He's an interesting, he's got some bloody good, he's pulled out a lot of good data from old books, let's put it that way. But he's also put his own little two-penn'orth in as well, because he's got insight in what do you expect. He put the effort in. Good Shepherd, Matt Damon. Mind Race has given us a YouTube there, thanks for that. I'll have a look at that after me. Treen says, when is that Phoenix event? I've done that. House of CCC. You have said some very important information in this, the most won't see. But those who do will agree, so well done, Sean. Well, thank you very much, sir. I do know that. But even so, it is important stuff. Because people do give up to, we can't do anything about this. We can do everything about it. Everything. Every man and his dog. Pure knowledge. Transpocalypse is here. Prophecy is just the old plan. Yeah, it's a script. Is it prophecy or is it script writing? Right, this is the script. Let's build it. Yeah, energy. Yeah, frequency. Vibration. Energy is the war, forcing. Frequency is the mind job. The education. Yeah. Vibration is money. Innit? Money and all that goes with it. I think Tesla, he knew what he was talking about. Understand those three things, and we're starting to understand how they do it. Because that's what they command, and that's what they keep from you. There's no way could they allow Tesla. No way could they have backed him. We'd have all known enough to undermine everything that you've done in this pseudoscience. Untitled says spot on. Thanks, Untitled. House of CC, see what I mean on free flow. House of CC, pure knowledge. Prophecy is just, sorry, I've done them on there. Cool Chili Girl. Hello, Cool Chili Girl. An apple for the teacher. Thank you for the lesson. Well, thank you very kindly. House of CC, I'm following a star, a wise man. Well, thank you. House of CC, see, the greatest threat to us now, it's the people themselves. It is, unfortunately. But, the fruit bats who are taking this all out, there's going to be more and more of us left, like this. Then, we need to start talking to our military. We need to start talking to our politicians. We need to start moving it into the system. You know, I've been asked again if I'll stand. I don't know. Because there's no way am I taking any oaths, that's a fact. So you'd have to be as independent. I don't know. Actually, I don't know whether I'd have enough people that'd even give a shit, to be quite honest, even in my own town. So, I don't know, maybe I'll have to put feelers out. But it does depend on how I can wangle that round. We ain't getting trapped on person. So, the great stretch. Yeah, have you heard of Harry Hope? I haven't, no. Harry Hobart and Alexander Tomb in America. I never have, no. If you can put a link up, Joe, that'd be good. Because I do have a look. I've started looking at these comments nowadays. Trine says she's fine. Good for that, Trine. I'm glad to hear that. Just got a cough. Brought back from Manchester. Delayed at like. Don't you start blaming Northerners for your cough, Trine. That's disgusting. You mean you brought it down here, spread it all around Manchester, and booked it off back to Scotland? Is that what you did? Yeah, Aggie squeezer. I don't know. Love you really, Trine. Manchester delayed at Lancaster. I should have dropped by. Haha. Ooh, you might have been putting in sauerkraut. They might have been stepping in cells there if you're not careful. LFX, belligerence. Belligerence. Yeah, nice spotted that. Tree says definitely a script. Yeah, it once happened. The story we're told. They've rebuilt it, reasked it, and projected it into the future as futurism. That has always been my sort of guess to it, really. Yes, I think you don't have to take an oath now. That's good because I ain't taking no oaths to no big ears. I can guarantee you that. House of CCs, you got to make it happen. You do. We do. We do. And it's been an enlightening week for me in relation to why people are not coming together. It's a sad state of affairs because most people are good people. They mean well. But I think, as soon as money is involved, it goes to hell. It goes to hell. Because that then becomes the prime motive. There's a lesson for anybody. As soon as money's involved, everything else goes out the window. The motive is money. And shame on you, everybody that's operating that formula. Got stuck at Lancaster, bloody freezing. You keep calling us. It's more cold up there, isn't it? We old sheep and haggis. There's all haggis running around still up there. Interesting. I had an interesting conversation the other day with a guy. That so he knows somebody who's married to a transgender and identifies as a budgie. Right? Get this. This is so important. This because I don't even think jocks know this. Anyway, this guy that's identified as a budgie, he flew over at Pennines, realised he just sort of like gone over Yorkshire, shit himself because he knows that they're like shag sheep. Come back over onto west side at Pennines, good side, because I live here. Off up through Cumbria over to mountains and then into Scotland. And he was getting a bit tired and he needed a pee, so he thought, I'm going to have to land here. So, anyways, this is the smoke coming up from the field. Right? He thinks, I'll go down here. Anyway, he gets down, there's this guy there, all fluffy ginger hair, beard, everything, with a skirt on. And he says to him, what's that all about, like? Well, he says, I'm Connor McLeod. He said, Connor McLeod. He said, I was kicked out of my village, like. He said, because I kept running around going, there can be only one. There can be only one who wants to live forever. Anyway, he got kicked out of his clan. So he says to him, well, the reason why I've got this skirt on, he says, unknown to many men, he says, the haggis, he says, the reason why we catch these haggis, he said, because it buries itself. He says, and what it started doing, it runs out of one hole, shouts, out with the first, and runs off into another. And it just does it all the time to piss us off. So he said, so we started to kill it. He said, so what we do, he says, we grab it hard, he says, and then we shag it. We shag it first. That's why they wear a skirt. He said, then they knife it to death, because they like to knife it. They take mane off for judge's wig. Yeah. And rest of haggis is for that bag of windpipes that make all that racket. Yeah? So what he basically is saying is, the jocks actually shag the haggis first, and that's the origin of the kilt. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, what else can I say except till the next time.
electronic